Welcome to Action on Pain, a podcast dedicated to highlighting the significant efforts underway in Canada to address chronic pain.
By presenting perspectives from individuals who live with pain, researchers, clinicians, and other stakeholders, we explore various impacts on people's lives and the initiatives, research endeavors, and the committed professionals working to effect meaningful change.
This work is guided by Health Canada's Action Plan for Pain. Join us as we raise awareness and share stories that are shaping the future of pain management in Canada.
Welcome to Action on Pain. I'm Keith Meldrum, and as always, I'm joined by Jennifer Daly-Cyr and Virginia McIntyre. I get the pleasure of welcoming today's guest, and it's my honor to introduce Dr. Mike Hildebrand. Dr. Hildebrand is an Associate Vice Provost, Graduate Student Affairs, Professor at the Department of Neuroscience at Carleton University, and an affiliate investigator at Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. Dr. Hildebrand is a busy man. Dr. Hildebrand, we're so eager to hear your insights on the Action Plan for Pain in Canada, and it is our deepest pleasure to welcome you joining us today. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Keith, and thanks to you all. It's a real honor to be here and talking about these things among dynamos in the landscape.
Thanks, Mike.
Really happy to be here.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks. And so we're going to start kicking it right off. So I want to learn a little bit more about your research, both with animal models and human tissue, and how you engage patient partners and how this is advancing the action plan.
Awesome. So do you want me to just kick it off and kind of talk, give you kind of a snapshot?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
That sounds great. So my research started kind of with your typical rodent preclinical models. So we have models of pain, and really the goal of those models is to try to understand how pain processing is working normally, kind of at a molecular, cellular level, the different signals and how they're regulated to help drive normal pain, which we need to protect ourselves and all those reasons why pain is important. And then to also understand what goes wrong and what changes in those circuits to cause chronic pain. And we can talk about kind of ways that we're really trying to improve the utility of the findings with those models. But kind of what Virginia alluded to is the fact that more recently, or when I started my lab here at Carleton University in Ottawa, I was really fortunate to make a connection with the neurosurgeon, Dr. Yves Sy at the Ottawa Hospital. And Dr. Sy has access to spinal cord tissue from organ donors. So even though the person's passed away and they've obviously consented to being a donor, as well as the family has consented to be a donor, not just to save lives for the different donors, organs, but also for research.
Amazing.
And so it means we can take that human tissue and start to ask whether these mechanisms that we've been investigating and potential new treatments for pain that we're investigating in our rodent models, whether those same mechanisms and potential treatment targets are conserved in human spinal pain circuitry. And so that's been a really exciting new direction that our lab has been using.
Incredible.
That is staggering stuff. And the human tissue, it's one thing to look at things theoretically or even in animal models, but to have that human tissue is just fantastic.
Yeah. And we take it seriously, obviously, because it's such a precious gift, right? That these people have, in the time of tragedy and loss, have donated. And so we really try to maximize the amount of impact and discovery we can with each donor. So we do different types of experiments that actually, it's cool to see how that kind of fundamental research, how that knowledge kind of builds. And so it took years to kind of figure out how to do these kinds of recordings and studies using rodent tissue. And so all of that expertise kind of aligned so that when we had this opportunity to try these experiments on human tissue, we kind of knew the key variables to, for example, to help protect the tissue from cells from dying, how to then do different types of electrical recordings to study the individual pain processing neurons. And so it's been really cool to see how that then can lead to the next advance. And before we go further, I should say, whenever I say we, it means my students. I'm not the one doing any of this anymore. They're driving it forward. And I'm being blessed to have just amazing students that are passionate about this. And I think some of you have had the chance to interact with them. So you've seen it firsthand, just the passion, the dedication, the commitment, and the hours that it takes drive this kind of research forward as they do their graduate studies or postgraduate work.
We also know that you're leading that ship. You're navigating that ship for them, and they look to you for that, and they respect that so much. And I want to say that at the time that the announcement came out for having access to the human tissue, I of course live in Ottawa as well, and I remember that being quite highly profiled in the news here in terms of it being so significant for the Ottawa Research Institute and Carleton University and your lab to be working together with Dr. Sai. It's just a really impressive launch in that. And, it was made clear at that time, and you've made it clear every step of the way how important that human tissue is and how incredible it is that people have, in fact, allowed for that to happen. So you've been, you and your students are incredibly respectful.
Yeah. And it's cool because it is rare to have kind of that access. So Dr. Sai is the only one in Canada doing this kind of for research. And there's centers kind of across the globe now starting to do this kind of research in the pain space. But there's not that many. Right. There's kind of a handful of teams, but it is expanding as we turn to kind of alternative approaches and human tissue approaches. But what I wanted to say is it's cool how it started. Dr. Sai came and gave a talk at Carleton. I was a new professor. Being a professor, you often meet with the speakers after, but I was thinking, well, what she's doing is pretty far removed. She said, hey, I have this human tissue. Could you use it? And I had several reasons of why I thought it wouldn't work. As a typical scientist, you're thinking of but I thought, okay, yeah, let's try it. And then we tried it, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how resilient that tissue can be. And I wanted to just say, I think it does touch on the power of connections and dialogue. And I think that's why podcasts like this are so key, because often you don't know kind of what the next step, what the next advanced discovery, treatments, even just sharing lived experiences. You don't know what you don't know. And so often I think throughout my career, and I'm sure you can speak to your lives too, those kind of unexpected connections, it's cool to see where they can lead.
What a powerful connection that led to something completely unique in Canada. And wow, how terrific to be.
I love that story. We've heard from a few people about these amazing research initiatives or foci that have occurred because of a happenstance conversation in a hallway or somebody coming up and saying, hey, I got this thing. Do you think you could use it? And it just blossoms into what you have, like one of this amazing thing. And often I think, at least for me, before I got, on the periphery of research, research is this great big white ivory tower and it's all formal and everybody's very prim and proper. And in fact, it's people just bumping into each other and saying, hey, I got this thing or I got this problem. Can you help me out? And it just happens over a lunch or standing in the hallway. It's amazing. Yeah.
Sorry, just before we move on, as my head's running, I'm realizing we're not the only ones in Canada, because that speaks to how this grows. Okay. In Quebec now, there's a network that's being led by Reza Sharif, and so there's now more people doing this kind of research. So
I guess I should have said first in Canada at that time.
Okay. No, I said it wrong too. I'm not correcting myself. We forget the advances that are happening in the
Great.
Yeah.
But I think for our listeners to know what you think of this human tissue and the value of it, I think that's going to bring something home to our listeners to hear the researchers talk about this gift that they've been given. So that's much appreciated, Mike.
Yeah, because the idea is to really help bridge that translation between these kind of typical rodent preclinical models and new treatments for human, which aligns exactly with, right, the Canadian Pain Task Force and the Action Plan for Pain. The idea that we have all of this leadership in Canada of pain researchers and all these fantastic discoveries. And I think as a collective body of researchers, we're all thinking, well, how can we move those discoveries towards new treatments? And these type of biological treatments being one tool of the many to address the biopsychosocial, I should say that too, that we get that's one kind of tool in the tool belt for managing.
And I appreciate the broad lens that you bring in, and having had an opportunity to meet with some of your students and how just amazing they are. But I mean, for me personally, we talk about the biopsychosocial and the importance of it. And of course, I'm also firmly, you can't forget the underlying biology of pain. I mean, it exists. We have nociceptors and it's a sensation and the brain goes, hey, that's pain. Like that is fundamental to pain it's all the things that the human experience of that sort of that interacts with it. So to wrap your arms around it, like you guys are doing, and I just wanted to touch on, something I learned last week from your lab. Outside of the human tissue work, which I think is like phenomenal, you're doing work in rats and mice that sort of mimic human behavior. I mean, there's the tickling of mice and seeing how they respond, and I was just blown away by that because it's short of like doing it on human beings. You're using these animals that are close to humans and seeing their responses and how that affects their pain. Like that is like that's truly looking at the person who has pain and trying to figure things out.
Yeah, exactly. Try saying that at a cocktail party. What do you do? Well, we tickle rats.
Yeah.
So yeah, why are we tickling rats?
Yeah.
And how does that relate to pain?
Yes.
I'm sure that some of the listeners are thinking, where did we go here on this?
This went
podcast?
sideways
But
fast.
the idea is that tickling of the rats mimics their natural rough and tumble play. And so rats are highly social and they form bonds, including with each other, but also with the experimenters. And so we're really trying to tap into rats being the idea that they have a biocycle, so their internal psychological states, and social. They're social. And so when we tickle them, they generate kind of this play behavior. What we've discovered too is that often we try to measure pain response, or we do measure pain responses by those kind of reflexive pain responses, which are one tool for rats.
Right.
And because we can't ask them if they're in pain, because they can't tell us like we can with humans. But actually, rats are talking. It's just some of their communication is in ultrasonic range that we don't hear. They have these ultrasonic vocalizations. And there's certain types at a certain frequency that they emit, 50 kilohertz frequency, that corresponds to laughing, basically. And so when you tickle them, they laugh. When they're playing in their arena with all their toys and running around, they laugh. And so we're using that as a way to measure the emotional state and emotional well-being of the rats. And then we can study the impacts of pain on those, pain states on those, and then see if we take potential treatments, how that impacts. So it's a way to try to measure and assess that emotional component to pain that is sometimes missing in some of our animal models. So that's the story behind why we are tickling.
That's interesting.
I mean, it's so applicable to people, right? So short of having human beings come into your lab and say, let me tickle you, which there's probably a whole human resources issue that will occur there by the university. So that's not going to happen. But to be able to determine that these are the behaviors that rats exhibit, and then to be able to subject them to that, and then to see how they respond as it relates to their pain, that completely, it's like translate into human beings and furthers your research on what to like. I find that just so staggeringly fascinating.
Yeah. And I think those ways of trying to bridge, right?
Yes.
Like once again, it's kind of how can we make our rodent preclinical models more predictive, more valid when it comes to human conditions?
Right.
And that can be the types of pain models we have, but that can be the types of measures.
And just another thought in my head here, and what this speaks to me is the importance of like the role of basic science in pain research. And I know had many students, graduate students or postgrads, say to me they didn't really understand, they didn't really see that connection of what they're doing in the lab to human people, like to people's lives. And I mean, there it is right there. Like the work that happens at these quote basic levels in the lab are the future, therapies, pharmacological, interventional, psychological, whatever of tomorrow that will help people live better with their lives. So the young basic scientists are laying the groundwork for the future of better pain care tomorrow. It's so important. And what they do means so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I've learned so much from you and your students in the lab, and just listening to their presentations and so on, learning about the parallel between rodent models and human tissue struck me at a very deep level, an unexpected level, from the standpoint that I don't know that I fully understood why rodent models, how they're being used. But then when they started demonstrating the parallels, it was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. And it just, it's just fascinating. I thought it was very fascinating before that, but now it's like, I see that connection. And Keith was saying in terms of that desire to, move the dial, and every chance there is to chat with the students about how their work is having an impact and will have an impact down the road is always gratifying as well.
So, I mean, you talk about that. You talk about rats, and I guess I'm missing the connection. How are you engaging with people with lived experience within your labs?
So those are not the donors. I should say that.
Oh, good.
Those are the
Good.
donors,
Good.
separate, not the tissue. But so I'm really blessed to have Jennifer as a patient partner, a person with lived experience, as part of our team. And before we kind of go into that, it's cool. Jennifer and I, once again, the power of connections. It was at an event linked to, I think, the Canadian Pain Society when we first were connected. And then we realized we're both in Ottawa. And so there was that opportunity for in-person connection.
Cool.
But Jennifer just provides insights. Because often you don't, like I said, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So just having an outside perspective with that lived experience of knowing what variables, what details might be really important when we're thinking of how to design an experiment, right? What factors may be important in our rat models, in our human tissue, in terms of how it's collected, the demographic or medical information that we can or can't get for our donors. And so having that voice and perspective is key for science. It's also key, I think, for people. The development of the trainees in the lab for them to see, and Keith has also spoke with our team, and both of you sharing your experience has been tremendously impactful for students. Just to see, like you were saying, Keith, why it matters, the relevance of what they're doing. Sometimes they don't see, they think, well, a clinical researcher, that makes sense why you would partner with a person with lived experience, but a basic science researcher who's looking at molecules and cells, how does that relate? And so it's been really neat for them, for their personal development, career development. And so it's just been highly rewarding, and I'd recommend it to anyone I'm kind of considering from either side, I guess, of that kind of relationship.
Do you think, as this generation of scientists and academics come along that are, that demographic that you have right now, do you see a difference in them as to being more open to having these conversations to people who live with pain as compared to maybe older generations of scientists who are less open to that? What is your take? Are you seeing a shift? Are you seeing this is something that they want, or what do you think?
In terms of science, that's a good question. I would say yes, in terms of, well, obviously reduce stigma, but also I think we're starting to realize, like, I think at least when I was doing graduate school, that it seems so disconnected to whatever disease you were studying or human health condition. You were a researcher and that's what you did, right? You focused on gene X or cell Y, and that's what you did. And you didn't even really kind of think of how you could engage and towards treatments and people with lived experience in populations. And so I think we're starting to realize as a society, as a community, of how we are connected and how it's so useful at different levels, from the basic scientist to the psychologist to the person with lived experience to the healthcare professional, of how we all can speak with each other and how those conversations can help each one of us, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's changing.
I know for myself and some projects I've been involved in that it's actually kind of changed their direction with certain things you're looking at. Has that been an experience for you within your lab?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Those conversations, you never know. And it's hard to predict how, and it's often, initial discoveries can change direction. Like we had some research in sex differences that an initial finding, we're like, whoa. So that's the thing. Science by definition is often unpredictable.
Right.
And so being open to those kind of new directions, which can come from within the discoveries, but it also can come from inputs from people like with lived experiences that can help shift how things go.
Yeah, it certainly brings it why it's so important to have that lived experience at the table.
Yes.
Any thoughts around what next or what might be needed in order to keep the action plan for pain going, and as it aligns with your research and your lab and your graduate students and so on?
So in terms of the big picture, in terms of the action plan, I think continued support for all the different levels of research and treatment, from healthcare services, right? Patient supports and all of those things, all the way to fundamental research. Is that because often we don't know, even though we want that bang for our buck in terms of moving it towards real world impact and that being in this case pain, we don't know what little discovery of what little molecule may lead to that. So that's why it's so critical to support research of all types. So that's one way. And then that knowledge translation I see, and that's at least in terms of my perspective and my involvement of having opportunities like this to chat with people from different perspectives, to also communicate what we're doing to the public, I see is really important in terms of translating that knowledge to discoveries, to understanding, to all of those things.
I mean, they say, Mike, it takes 17 years to get your research out.
Exactly.
Besides this, how else do you get that out? Because as someone who lives with pain, I want to know, what have you found? What's going, what are the changes? Knowledge is power.
Exactly. In both ways. And so that's where I think that can lead. In our lab, I guess it's just kind of continuing to work on some of these projects. We have some other kind of new directions. One kind of new direction is working with a chemist at the University of Ottawa to try to preserve that precious human tissue so that we can do more experiments on it. And so that's really kind of at the early stages, but it's just showing how, once again, working with people from different perspectives, in this case, a chemist, can potentially lead to new directions that I hadn't thought about before kind of meeting them and discussing what they do.
It's hard to know in advance what doors are going to be open or what that will look like, right? So it just kind of carries on one layer to another.
Yeah.
That's great. And is there anything else you mentioned about having an opportunity just to talk about it? Is there anything we haven't talked about today that you feel like, oh, geez, I'd love to have an opportunity to mention this?
No, except maybe just if I would end on one thing, just the power of trainees. And they're what energize me. They're what drive the team forward. And that's the most rewarding part of this gig, right? Is seeing them lead things and then them becoming their independent. I have my first PhD student who then was a postdoc and is now a professor at Waterloo, Anne-Marie Dedek, and just seeing them now and bringing new ideas. And so I think, and I think for all of us, right? That's in this community. And I guess that's the other thing we haven't touched on, the power and strength of the pain community in Canada. And things like Pain Canada and Canadian Pain Society, Chronic Pain Network, all these amazing, and I'm probably missing some, so sorry if I'm not, Power Over Pain, People in Pain Network. But we have all of these groups that are working together, and we have leaders in all of those different areas. And so I just feel blessed to be connected to some of them in different ways.
And I'll just add one comment about, like, over to your point around seeing your students. You would see them obviously, like, frequently. On the occasions that I get to see your students, and over the last few years, I've seen the progress, within them, and just, their level of confidence and the depth of their research and their understanding and things. Well, I'm learning constantly when I'm in the lab, but it's very impressive to see what is happening within the Hildebrand lab at Carleton University. I mean, just that student group, trainee group alone is just very, very impressive, and under obviously phenomenal leadership. And so, but yeah, and I mean, so I guess just, we want to just thank you so much for taking this time, putting this perspective into what's happening in the lab for you, what's happening, how that's moving the dial in Canada, and how each of these aspects and features of the studies you're doing, whether it be with animal models or human tissue or both, are moving the dial in terms of action plan for pain, and how that collaboration and correlation across different organizations is happening. And so just need to thank you so much for taking the time with us today. We know you're a busy guy. I mean, you've got a very lengthy title. Holy smokes. But we appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Mike. We'd also like to thank all of you who are tuning in to the Action on Pain podcast. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us today on Action on Pain. If you enjoyed the discussion, please follow us on your preferred podcast platform to stay updated, and please share with your networks. A 5-star rating and review would help others find our show. Your feedback is important.
This podcast does not contain any medical advice. Please consult with your doctor if you have any questions or concerns.
The Action on Pain podcast is made possible by the generous support of the Chronic Pain Network, a national research and knowledge mobilization network.
The views, opinions, and content shared by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Chronic Pain Network or its funders.